There have been a lot of successful indie animated series that sprung up in the last few years. Murder Drones recently just wrapped up with its finale. Hell of a Boss is on its second season and going as strong as ever, racking up tens of millions of views per episode. And Has Been Hotel, off its pilot alone, which is currently sitting at over 100 million views, got picked up by A24 and as an Amazon Prime exclusive. And though controversially, it recasted the entire main roster with some star-studded acts like Keith David, who is also my beloved Sergeant Foley. Ramirez has been just wrapped up its first season on Amazon Prime, and by all accounts, it has been a stellar success. No matter how you feel about the quality of these series or the people involved behind them, I see their successes as genuine wins for indie animation as a medium, even if there is work to be done regarding the execution in the future. That's a longer discussion that isn't within the scope of this video. What can be said is that the previously unproven hope many people had would come with the internet is that you can take a chance on a passion project, and while it's still definitely a gamble that you stake on the quality of the work put out and the incredible commitment of time and effort, the potential winnings is that that effort might be rewarded if your work of passion is really resonating with people. I have friends in animation, video editing, music, and other fields who traditionally only worked within the online space, like they did stuff for pooey YouTubers like me, and they have gotten some incredible opportunities through the success of formerly indie animated pilots going gangbusters online. In the past, as I understand it, if you wanted to get funding to make an animated series, you'd have to directly pitch it to some behind-the-scenes gatekeepers or executives in order to get your project greenlit. Nowadays, creators have the opportunity to circumvent the traditional process by producing and releasing their works in the public independently, with the hope that said work will find a group of people that like it enough to call it home. The internet has lowered the barrier for entry in pretty much every creative medium out there. Indie animation has no doubt had a path of its own towards democratization, but it has suffered from a significantly slower process and faced a far more uphill battle than other mediums. This is largely due to the time and effort required to produce anything in the medium. Animation is objectively more work put in to produce less content if you want to talk about it in icky influencer terms. Because of that, when an animation manages to even get finished and put out, and when it breaks through in a major way, it's all the more impressive that it's made a lane for itself, and because of how hard it is to pull off, it will find itself with very few peers in its class. Hi again, guys, and I am genuinely ecstatic at the success of homegrown grassroots animation over the last few years, but if one indie animated series has unequivocally charmed me from the jump, appealed to me because of little details that feel absolutely intentional and that I can't stop thinking about, where on every watch it feels like I've discovered a new thing that makes me go, no fucking way that was in there and I missed it. You saw the title. It would have to be the amazing Digital Circus. It is produced by the same studio behind Murder Drones, Glitch, and it's masterminded, lovingly shaken in its cradle by, and cursed upon its very birth by gooseworx. First and foremost, the comedic timing is some of the best in the business when appealing to this specific brain right here. It's got all the hallmarks of the types of cuts I enjoy in video editing, and the amount of time it lets you sit with something before pulling the trigger on a joke is perfect. And oftentimes those bits are in service of a wider narrative. See these exhibits from the literal pilot.
Well, how do I, leave? My comedy mask is broken again.
Ah! Oh! Gangle, you startled me. An insect collection?
I think it's a nest.
And of any indie animated series that have gotten picked up, this one has perhaps scored the most impressive distribution deal, where episodes will continue to release for free on YouTube and will release at the same day and time on Netflix. According to the showrunners of the Digital Circus, Netflix has no input on what they do in said episodes, only having the right to distribute it on the platform. This is genuinely unprecedented as far as I'm aware, and it's hard to overstate the significance of. I have false started 3 versions of this script because I have just so much to say. This is the 4th, and I've been trying to cut down how long it takes me to actually start talking about the meat of the Digital Circus. But it feels like I'm not doing it justice if I don't try to contextualize the Digital Circus and how one of a kind it is. Both in presentation and in reach, it has a real shot of being the most viewed animated pilot ever made, currently sitting at over 300 million views and climbing. And I also wanted to talk about all the things that came before it that infected my brain specifically. I expect to fail covering some of the things I have to say. A lot got cut out of this video. This is a really personal one for me. It strums a chord in my epididymis that sex never could. You see, running parallel to 7-year-old me's aspiration of being a YouTuber of any kind, but I specifically ended up in the Flash animation community, back when using the version of Flash owned by Macromedia was considered base, and struggling to convert an SFW file to a video was a sign of purity. I saw Super Mario Bros. Z fight scenes and the intricate animated fight choreography that had me jumping around my room like a Travis Scott concert at the Roman Coliseum. I saw Nazo Unleashed and wanted to learn how to draw to make those those fights myself. Outside of Sonic, I saw animated shorts on YouTube from Egoraptor, Psychic Pebbles, OniNG, and who knows how many else. That is to say, I was deeply influenced by what I consumed in my preteens. I really wanted to be an animator for a long time, and I was like seriously trying to learn. I was trying to learn how to draw just so I could animate the drawings. But a friend of mine who was better at art, Sonic spriting, animating, in basically all regards of what we were both trying to be, he told me I was shit, why I was shit, and unfortunately he was right, so I gave up. I decided to go back to plan A with the dream of being a YouTuber. Not gonna lie, this is far more my calling than animation is, but that is still a treasured time in my life, and I'm glad I had. Plus, making Reddit slop memes, I am not a starving artist, but instead a relatively well-off content farm. Regardless, my time not only in animation, but growing up online during the early internet has primed me to really fall in love with everything the amazing Digital Circus has been doing. With that in mind, full spoilers for this series, there's only 3 episodes out, and they are all free to watch on YouTube, and I highly recommend you watch the series before listening to me gush about it. It's basically the same prerequisites I gave for my parkour civilization breakdown, but there's way less stuff that you have to watch before you get into it, and somehow it's way more information dense. The Digital Circus is pretty straightforward on the surface. Its aesthetics are really strongly couched in 90s era PC visuals. It's whimsical and cartoony in nature. It's not trying to be realistic by any stretch of the imagination. And despite that, it somehow, according to gooseworx herself, is heavily inspired by I have no mouth and I must scream. The circus itself is a digital realm, go figure, where the inhabitants are real people who put on a VR headset in the real-life flesh world and became permanently transported to the circus. The entry point seems to be more Sword Art Online via the headset, but whether the world itself is more Log Horizon, where the video game is their new material reality, or if it's more .hack sign, where there's a genuine simulation and the real world actually exists to try and escape to, remains to be seen. New recruits usually start tweaking as soon as they get there because no shit, who wouldn't? They try to rip off the headset, pull their eyes out, you know, the usual stuff, and they have to slowly acclimate to this new artificial reality. Our main point of view character is Pomni, whose sudden appearance fucks up the whole vibe everybody else had gotten comfortable with, all of whom seem to be long-term tenants of the circus. And we learn that new humans popping out of oblivion is exceedingly rare. Some of the key info here is that humans who are brought into the world can remember parts of their real life, though it's patchy and kind of vague. I'm actually not certain it's revealed all the details on how that works. The one thing a person specifically cannot remember, though, is their original human name. It is the first of a number of rules in the circus that, while maybe not intentional, have the cumulative effect of divorcing an individual from their original identity. Another is that they are given a new, seemingly randomized name that they kind of just have to ride it out with. It's basically what happened with me on YouTube, where this whole series is a big metaphor for living a public online life and also a retelling of the Bible. It's established from the jump that there is no escape from the circus. Everybody who has tried to leave has failed, and it's an exercise in futility. There is no known win condition for escape, like beating every floor on Castle Ironcrad or collecting all of I Like Menderman's pages. And worse yet, there's not even an option to opt out. You can never kill yourself. All circus members are effectively immortal. Asphyxiation, mutilation, all forms of bodily harm. Shit, it might hurt a lot, but sorry dog, you're making it out the other side whether you like it or not. In this predicament, the only certainty of eternity is monotony. You can try new things for 1 trillion lifetimes, but it's only ever a stopgap to the inevitable. You will run out and you will be bored. The only thing you can do is your best to move forward anyways for as long as you can. But inevitably though, some people lose this mental fight with immortality, and in the Digital Circus universe, they become abstracted, where they can't handle the notion that leaving the circus is impossible, that they're going to be here forever, to a point that their physical forms seem to untether from that reality entirely. They mutate, warp, and get corrupted into relatively eldritch beings with the ability to infect anyone who touches said abstracted thing. Important note, the rot spreads. The effects of this corruption can be undone by our all-seeing eye-type guy, Caine. He literally has hundreds of eyes. He's the only recurring character so far who is not a human, but rather an AI instead. Caine has a spot where he dumps these problem-abstracted humans, and you'd think this is where the closest thing to death comes for you. Maybe it's a peaceful end, but I don't think you're actually dead. The only thing we see is that you're sequestered away from those who are still sane. You might just be falling forever, buddy, stuck with the new, fucked-up version of yourself. Caine himself is functionally the god of this world, or at least has dominion over the fabric of reality here. That said, through his actions in the show, and according to gooseworx herself, Caine does have ultimately good intentions. He's not evil. He does his best to try and prevent humans from becoming abstracted during their stay by giving them distractions from the overwhelming concept that is endlessness. And he does this by trying to create adventures for our characters to go on and take roles in these little mini digital universes. He also knows how much the characters wanted to leave the circus. They're looking for an exit, all of them. He even attempted to create an exit door for them to go through but he never showed them it because he just couldn't figure out what to put on the other side. He doesn't know how to leave either. As all-powerful as he seems to be, though, Caine has some level of humanity to him. He's deeply unsure of his role in the world, believing himself to only be good at creating adventures that the humans he plays host for enjoy. And when confronted with the idea that none of them like these quests, and they actually just traumatize the shit out of them, Caine's self-doubt causes reality around him to completely fall apart. This duality in Caine's intention versus the results of his actions also comes in the form of the pocket realities he creates. Episode 2 is when we're first shown one of the pocket dimensions that Caine creates for the sake of an adventure to take place in. In episode 1, he had only put Pomni on an adventure within the circus itself, trying to ease her into the concept of it all, but in her first ever Outworld adventure, she manages to break literally everything immediately. Well, it's more like Jax messing with her makes her end up in these really unfortunate situations. Yeah, Pomni ends up clipping through the fabric of reality alongside one of Caine's fabricated NPCs. Till now, we've been under the impression that these are only NPCs. They're not actually alive, they just fulfill a role in the quest that Caine is sending them on to have fun during. These are sentient beings just as capable of having existential crises as any of us. This NPC, Gummy Goo, has his rude awakening by finding the character models of everybody he thinks have been his lifelong friends. Their character models, including his own, is just sitting on a shelf waiting to be used in scenarios and placed like pawns on a chessboard. When asked to think harder about his life and his parents, he realizes there are major gaps in his memory. There was just no reason to ever question it, so it never came up. Gummy Goo, my best friend and homie, had an existential crisis that, let's be honest, Pomni put up a LeBron performance comforting him through, and she offered to bring him back to the circus. It's like, hey, your whole life just turned out to be a lie, but there is a life beyond what you knew. He was like mad depressed, but it seems like he's on the up and up to give it a shot. After some talking, Gummy begins to see the value in living a life with more meaning and accepts the offer. So the duo make their way out of purgatory and head back to their new home. But as soon as Gummy Goo, my bestie, my homie, my favorite, my beloved, makes it into the Digital Circus Society, Caine kills him in room temperature blood. The reasoning he gives is because getting confused between the human and artificial intelligences is too dangerous. But it's very notable to me that he smited an NPC right after they started to form an identity for themselves, instead of ascribing to the one he assigned to them. Episode 3 of Digital Circus came out recently, which is kind of what sparked this whole want to talk about it again, and to make this video. And to me, this is where a sort of pattern emerged. Each episode is kind of like an adventure of the week thing, which, it fits. But every episode kind of centers around a buddy cop dynamic, where Pomni is one of the buddies, but she's paired with a different person in each episode. You see, in the main cast, there are 7 major characters: Pomni, Kinger, Jax, Zubul, Gangle, Ragatha, and Caine. Where in episode 3, Pomni finds herself kicking it alongside Kinger. Up to this point, the only thing we know about Kinger is that he's portrayed as a complete fool. Despite, being a king, he's supposedly the one who's been around the circus the longest of our current cast, and therefore, apparently, the most unhinged. He hides in pillow forts, he's strangely keen on the idea of insect collections, and is generally seen as a burden to be around by the rest of the cast. Hell, the reason that Pomni ends up stuck alone with him is because of a fuck-up he made that got him and Pomni pulled into a trap. That poor girl goes through it, man. I just want to hold her. Just in my palms, I'll take care of her. All that is to say, it was a surprise when later in that episode, my goat locked the fuck in. Kinger and Pomni ended up in a shit situation because of Kinger's ineptitude. And said incompetence puts them literally in a dark place. But turns out that Kinger in the dark is his equivalent of Rock Lee taking off the training weights. This motherfucker gets a Doom super shotgun with only 2 bullets. He uses his floating hands to work some magic and tells Pomni, bro, I'm a top frag, chill. Then he one-shot, one-kills 2 parts of one singular horror monster and gets down to business. Even if this is the literal coolest thing ever, actions do have consequences, and we find out that the thing Kinger just killed was actually one of God's actual angels. So the punishment for Kinger and Pomni is getting sent to hell. Naturally. When they get down there, Pomni just decides, fuck it, and runs to the stairs that are presumably an exit, but gets possessed pretty much immediately. And when Kinger's trying to save her, the fucked up evil Pomni makes fun of him for having a dead wife, and Pomni only goes back to normal when Kinger just starts beating her over the head with the shotgun. This whole thing is weird. Kinger has been single-handedly solving most of the life-threatening problems they ran into since they got down there. Pomni notices, obviously, and asks Kinger directly, what the fuck happened? Why are you suddenly good at shit? Kinger's all, oh yeah, I have been acting different. You see, I had a wife, and she got me into insect collections, which I was previously adverse to, but now I think they're dope because she thought they were dope. And eventually she abstracted herself because, you know, the whole endless, meaningless life thing is a little tough. But I was in the dark with her in a pillow fort, and I managed to share one last moment where she was calm. It was almost like a piece of her came back even when abstracted. And so being in the dark brings me back to the clarity of that moment. And suddenly, the insect collection lines Caine has made up to this point, close to a year ago in real time, the dark spaces he chooses to stay in become clear as where he feels safest. Specifically, a pillow fort, because that was the last place he shared a moment with his wife. It all comes together in some really, really nice foreshadowing as to why Caine is the way he is. Becoming more lucid in the dark lets him even relay some details of his real life. Like, Caine is able to tell Pomni that apparently he has a comp sci degree, and I can only assume this is not information he gets to share with the others all that much. The way that Caine speaks to Pomni is almost fatherly. He's reassuring, but in a way that's meant to make Pomni more confident in her own abilities to make it through things through her own willpower. Outside of that, in episode 2, Pomni spends time with that NPC and manages to get him to try and give a shot at living life even after he found out his old one was a farce. In the process, coming closer to terms with her own position in the circus as well. With Caine, Pomni is likely the first person in ages, if not the first ever, to hear Caine share his story of his wife and what that meant to him. Caine becomes more competent, but it's in this frame of mind that he's able to impart the faith he has in Pomni to her. They know that when they both leave hell, Caine is not going to remember any of it, but Pomni will. That experience sticks with her, and she comes out the other side noticeably less traumatized than usual and more self-assured than she's ever been. It's like every episode, Pomni's gone on some sort of Zuko side quest with different characters, and in them, so far, she's changed somebody's life drastically. She's gotten to know somebody on a deeply personal level because of incredibly dire circumstances, making them more open about their most vulnerable moments. And Pomni herself leaves these interactions with some new perspective or lease on life, changed as much by the experience as the characters she helped in some way. gooseworx has said that the layout for this is 8 episodes in 1 season of the show, so currently there's 5 more to go, which, funny enough, is the exact number of characters left in the main cast that Pomni has not had a dedicated excursion with. I really wonder if this theory of mine will hold, and if it does, what kind of flips on the type of people behind their surface level behavior gooseworx has in store for these characters. I want to see what the hell they're gonna do with Jax in that kind of situation. Like, perhaps the last episode will be Pomni paired with Caine, where talking to someone who isn't human in a human way is the ultimate challenge. No point, nowhere. Hell, the insecurities of Caine's that may be broached in an episode like that were already teased in the therapy scene with Zubul, where the world starts collapsing. Alright, enough is enough. I want to get stupid now. I want to talk about references and some crackpot theories I personally vibed with, whether true or not. gooseworx said that a cool reminder that Digital Circus isn't a horror show, and episode 3 will be the only horror-themed episode of the whole series. I hope you like it. And they were excited that the one horror-themed thing they were going to do with the series happened around Halloween. That said, it feels like the horror influences have been present in the Digital Circus from the start, and it feels like, at least to me, that Goose is passionate about this kind of thing and has been putting it in the series where it fits very intentionally. You can argue that the series has like a kind of monster of the week format, except it's instead of every week, it's every 6 months. And if you're doing a thing where each episode is going to have a completely different vibe from the last, doing a horror one-off could definitely fit in that framework. But there's like specific moments in the non-horror episode that like really made me think of certain horror games and just games in general. In the first episode, when Pomni is spelunking through the exit bathrooms, there's this kind of like over-the-shoulder third-person shot that looks very similar to the angle a lot of AAA action games will have in the modern day. And Pomni is running like a horror protagonist, specifically Alan Wake, where as her grip on reality wanes, her footsteps slow in the same way that a character whose sanity meter is hitting rock bottom might find it harder and harder to continue on. The hallways stretches out further and further, becoming beyond reach in a way that reminds me of PT and calls back to other shots of the episode. In wider gaming stuff, there are a fuck ton of Gmod sound effects and source engine seeming references here, between the clipping of objects in the ground really resembling the way it happens in Gmod, if not being directly inspired by it, and the fake-ass exit door that Caine made is almost identical to a source asset as far as I can tell. I might be delusional. This series is really just a fucking field day for people who grew up on the shit that I did. The cast is full of millennials, so I might know plenty of TikTok references they wouldn't get, but they're still willing to engage with current culture in ways that you might feel are corny, but that I deeply appreciate their openness for. For instance, here is the original scene you need for the context of this joke.
Welcome back, my meowing milkmaids!
Don't ever call us that again.
Absolute cinema. Chills when I heard that. Anyways, here's the Twitter version.
Welcome back, my skibbity sigmas!
Don't ever quote brain rot again.
Those are the real voice actors, by the way, for both Caine and Jax. Alex Roken and Michael Kovac, respectively. Michael had this to say about the whole thing. The best thing about the amazing Digital Circus cast is that we are all millennials and grew up with the same dumb internet humor, so we're always down to do stuff like this if we think it's funny. It's very easy to write it off as cringe millennial humor, or an attempt at doing something that might appeal to Gen Z. You might say that if you're boring and lame. No sense of whimsy about you. But the first thing to understand is that as Gen Z and even Gen Alpha, if you watch Skibbity Toilet, the culture and so-called brain rot we find funny on its own, they probably originated in part by something that was created by millennials. Doesn't mean that the stuff they're doing now is going to come off as any funnier to you, but it's just kind of cool how the downstream effect leads to the next big thing for the younger guys. I personally don't mind that. There's a disconnect on the layers of irony of how some of us might find it funny, but that's not like inherently lesser, it just means I need to go outside more. On that note, the writers for the show should also go outside more, because I know I am a bastion of the exact type of person you shouldn't be, and as a result, I understood this Jax reference.
Now we're cooking. Hey, Ribbons, up and at 'em.
I don't think we...
Aren't you supposed to be submissive and agreeable?
This is my fucking issue. Jax thinks everything is a goddamn joke. This fucking asshole thinks he can be a dick to his driver, the new guy, Pomni, the veterans, the folks being nice to him, the NPCs, big monsters who can crush him. I can't stand him! And that is why I'm stupidly excited to see where his character goes and if this whole buddy cop angle that I'm reaching for actually ends up being true. Will he see the error of his ways? If he does, will he do way worse shit that will make it unforgivable? Let's see. I could point a million things I've thought about this series, but that's most of the ones I feel like putting in a video right now. I plan on continuing to give my initial thoughts on the episodes as they come out on the second channel, Quote. I'm not going to be showing like most of the episode in those videos because you should be watching the original to really get the full experience. It's genuinely great. But if you wanted to hear more about what I have to say in those specific episodes, maybe I'll revisit this topic in like a few months or a few years when I feel like the full story's completely out there. So yeah, at this rate, 2026. The point being, I think I'll have more to say later, but right now, less than halfway into the series, I'm hooked. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to drop a like and subscribe with notifications on. Anyways, this has been Kwite, and I'll see y'all next time.